Welcome back to Casuals Corner, and today I've got the honour of breaking down a very exciting fight that we have on our hands in the lightweight division. Islam Makhachev v Dan Hooker. Now this fight was made a little bit last minute. If you don't know the context to it, Dan Hooker took this on last minute as an absolute warrior against a fighter no one really wants to take after just coming off a win in Dubai to Nasrat Haqparast, a very impressive win, and he had to fly out and make weight on the same day. So he got a lot of props from the UFC here. I think he got even more props in this fight because he was nicely compensated, I believe, but he had to leave his hometown for a very long time. So a lot of context coming into this, and before we jump into the main fight, you know what to do. Hit the like, the subscribe, and the little bell icon to stay up to date with the content. Anyway, let's have a look here. Dan Hooker v Islam Makhachev. Makhachev is coming into this at, I have to do it with the accents. I like to roll the K and the H. He's coming into this at a very impressive 20-1. Obviously, we saw him get knocked out, quite brutally knocked out actually, early on in his career, which Dan Hooker would take a lot of solace from. I would say his most noticeable wins lately are his recent win against Thiago Moises, who tapped out Drew Dober as well from just sheer shoulder pressure, which is actually very impressive. If you know what Drew Dober looks like, he's got a massive head, massive chin, and he's very durable. And also his win against Arman Tsarukyan. Now I say that win because that was a very close fight, and Arman Tsarukyan almost levelled his grappling. He didn't quite, he came up a little bit short, but that was a very close fight. And again, Dan Hooker will be taking a lot of solace into that. Anyway, let's have a look at Dan Hooker. A very interesting fighter. The only difference between their sort of records is Dan Hooker's got 0 after his 1. But we love him for that 0 in a weird roundabout way because he's been in some absolute wars. Obviously, his most noticeable win has come against Paul Felder recently. Had a very close fight with Dustin Poirier. He came so close to beating the current champion. Again, that's why he's going to come into this with so much confidence. Didn't work out for him against Michael Chandler. Did just get clipped. Just come up short on the night. I think it was one of them things. I think it can happen to anyone, and Michael Chandler is a very good fighter. But again, very impressive win against Nasrat Haqparast. Made weight and fought pretty much on the same day, flying over from New Zealand. He showed his grappling, he showed his higher fight IQ. And before we jump into it and get into the meat and potatoes, let's have a look how they break down. So Islam is coming into the fight at 5'10" with a 70-inch reach. And that definitely is going to play a factor, I think, and we're going to come on to that. But he's fighting out the southpaw stance. Now, if we have a look at his striking, his offensive striking is relatively, I don't want to call it safe, but let's just say efficient. He doesn't land a lot of strikes per minute, as you can see, 2.24. His accuracy's good, is strong. His defense, again, is very strong, so he's quite conservative on the feet. But then you have a look at his grappling, and it tells a very different story. Naturally, you've got a free takedown average of 3, takedown accuracy of 65%, and you've got a takedown defense of 86%. I'm not too sure who's shooting on him, but 88% nonetheless, with a submission average of 1, which is pretty impressive. However, if we have a look on the flip side, we've got a very tough opponent for anyone in that division. Always a tough opponent in that division for anyone, and especially it will be for Islam. So we've got Dan Hooker. He's coming in at 6 foot with a 75-inch reach. So that's a 5-inch advantage, and obviously a couple of inches in height as well, which I definitely think will play a factor if Dan Hooker wants to get the win on this one. And obviously Dan Hooker fights out of that switch stance as well, so that's a strength of his. Then if we have a look at his striking, this is why the fight's so interesting, because it's very much a tale of the two tapes. We've got his strikes landed per minute is 5. Striking accuracy is decent at around 50%. His strikes absorbed are pretty high. However, we know that Islam is relatively reserved. And I think he's going to play a little bit smarter in this one. I don't think he's going to try and get in a firefight. Well, I hope not anyway. His striking defense is modest again. And then you have a look at his grappling credentials. Not amazing, but a higher takedown defense. And obviously a low submission average, but when you're Dan Hooker, you like to keep things standing. So there's no surprise there. But the one thing I will say before we have a look at Islam, because I will have to sing his praises at some point. If we have a look at Dan Hooker, he's been a little bit underlooked for this fight. And if we're to look at paths to victory for both of them, Dan Hooker's a very, like I said, a very dangerous opponent for anyone. He's very long, he's very rangy, and a little bit, I just done the breakdown to the Corey Sandhagen Petr Yan fight, a little bit the same way in that how Corey Sandhagen poses problem for Petr Yan is similar to Dan Hooker. The deficit is actually more in terms of reach, so he's actually at a little bit more of an advantage, and I think that's what he needs to do. I think he needs to try and keep him on range. I appreciate that's going to be very difficult, and he is going to be shooting a lot, but that's when he needs to use these feints and use that high striking IQ that he has, that I've seen so many times, and not lure out that beast that he's got inside of him, that devil that he's got inside of him to start a war, because that's not what he wants to do. I think he has to be selective the times that he closes the distance, because we know that Islam's grappling is so good. He's dominant in all facets of grappling as well. So even when it's quite high, he's got some nice trips, and this is a threat that he poses that Khabib didn't pose as much of. He's got some really nice trips. And as I was saying, Dan Hooker has very good grappling, actually very underrated, and I think he sprinkled a little bit of that into his last fight, not to in preparation to call out Islam, but just to show that he is well rounded, because I think sometimes people forget that he has got very good grappling, and he's a lot bigger. He's a lot bigger than other people in this weight class. Dan Hooker, like I said, he's 6 foot. He doesn't cut a ton of weight, but when you see him, like I said, he's very rangy, he's very long, he's got very long limbs, and he's heavy, and his cardio makes him heavier because he can keep a good pressure. So that definitely plays into it. He'll take solace in the fact that you have to think he wrestles with bigger guys all the time. He's in there with good light heavyweights in his gym like Goldberg. He's sparring with Israel Adesanya constantly, and that is important, because not only are you going to feel that weight more times than not from a very big guy like Adesanya. Maybe, obviously his grappling's not the same level, but you're going to have that weight on you a lot of times, and Adesanya does have good grappling. He's not awful, but not only does it give you that, it gives you the looks of the striking, which is so important, about controlling that distance to not allow the takedown, because I imagine Dan Hooker tries to wrestle Israel Adesanya quite a lot, and hopefully training with Adesanya he would have understood a little bit better how to control that range, and we've seen him do it. We've seen him pick guys off. You have a look at the Paul Felder fight, you have a look at the Dustin Poirier fight at times, but it's just when he gets it, he's the victim of his own success sometimes with Dan Hooker, and I love him for it in a weird way, but this is a time that I think if he's going to have a real title push and he's going to have a chance in his fight, he has to do it more so than ever. Now this is a 3-round fight, and I don't think that favours Dan Hooker in a strange way. I think if that plays 5 rounds, I think it's a different story. Now on the flip side, that is of course all very well and good saying how Dan Hooker is going to win the fight. On the flip side, Islam Makhachev is a dangerous and very tricky customer. Now, I'm not just saying this because I've watched a couple of his wins and I've seen his win record. Nothing like that. I've seen him get knocked out. Yes, he's not immortal, as Dan Hooker will allude to quite often, and I think rightly so. He's very confident coming into it, and so he should be, because he's a well-rounded fighter, and he's a matured fighter who's been in there with the top of the division. That is something he has over Makhachev. Now, people can compare them all day long, but that is factually something Dan Hooker has over him, and I think that's a big advantage here. But as I was saying, Islam Makhachev is no joke. I haven't just watched these wins and had a look at the green bit on Sherdog and thought, oh, he's good. No, training partners, people that have watched him on the mats, people that are his managers, obviously, people that have fought him, people that have gone into other gyms, people that have heard stories about him, know he's a very, very legit customer. He is the carbon copy of Khabib. Let's look at it. Basically from the same place. His father trained him his whole life. They look the same haircut, the same beard, the same village, the same similar fighting style. It is carbon copy Khabib, and he is no joke. And Javier Mendez said Islam Makhachev is the only person to ever take rounds from Khabib. The only person. Now, what I always say is those Russians, they're not known for bullshitting. You can say what you want about them in terms of fighters or personalities, but I've never really seen a lot of bullshit come out from them, and I've seen a lot of it backed up with statistics. If you look at Ankalaev, who's fighting on the card, backed up with statistics. I know he's got a loss to Paul Craig triangle, but that can happen to anyone. A lot of devastating wins. He's a very big problem. Petr Yan, look at his statistics, and devastating wins. He's a very big problem. You look at Khabib, speaks for itself. You look at Islam, speaks for itself. Like, there is a real problem there. There is a real problem there, and it is legit. They're not there to mess about. Islam's a tricky customer, and it's not going to be easy for Dan Hooker. It's not going to be easy at all. I don't think he'll get finished by Islam, but that wrestling threat is there. Now, the thing that's different to Khabib, they'll obviously always be compared. The thing is different. He's a lot slicker on the feet. He has a lot better striking. And I've heard him say about it before, he fell in love with his hands a little bit. And he didn't say that explicitly, but he says sometimes in his fights he can hear his corner saying, go to father's plan, go to father's plan. And he came out in an interview and was laughing about it. But what I did think about that, what I did pick up off of that is, he does like to strike. He does have nice striking. He's a very confident human being. I think he'll think he can knock Dan Hooker out. And he'll 100% believe that. Now, if he executes that game plan to try that or not is another conversation. But he'll definitely believe he can knock him out. Now, he's also, you have to look at it from the flip side. He's also walking in at 20-1. He has been pretty much indestructible. And Dan Hooker's a tricky customer, like I said. If Dan Hooker potentially lures him into that slugfest, that then could be very, very promising. Now, I think it's going to be hard for him to do, but I do think that's there. Like I said, just based off of what I've heard before, I think that opportunity is there. A couple of dirty inside clinches and a couple of left hooks, and I think he can make this a little bit messy, Hooker. So Islam has to stay disciplined. He has to stick to father's plan, I think, if he's going to win this. I know it sounds like the obvious path to victory, but I do say that because he has got some nice work on the feet, and I wouldn't be surprised that if this stood standing for a little bit quicker than people may think, and by that I mean maybe a couple of minutes, not 20 seconds. Like I said, good takedown defense from Dan Hooker, and you have to remember 3 rounds is a relatively short time for someone like Dan Hooker. He's always got the gas tank for 5 rounds, so he can afford to probably have a high amount of output, and I think he's going to be, again, slippery on the floor. But ultimately, my heart and my head are going one way. My head is telling me Islam all day. I think he is as special as they say, and I do think, hot take, I think he's the best lightweight in the world at the moment. You may call me crazy for that, you may call me hype train. From what I've observed and from what I've heard, and you can agree with me going off of that or not, but it's from the sources I'm hearing it from, I think he's the best lightweight in the world as it stands. So I think he could get it done via a decision. He's got 6 decisions on his card, so I think it could be a 7th. But man, I don't want to bet against Dan Hooker. I really don't. I really like Dan Hooker. I think he composes himself very well, and he's taken the right approach to it. He said he's not Superman. He's been beaten. He had a very close fight with Arman Sarukian. Now, I'm not saying, oh, he should have lost that or anything like that. I'm saying he's had a very close grappling match. So if Dan Hooker's seeing a very close grappling match, which he claims to be so good at, and he's been knocked out, which Dan Hooker is obviously a lot more well versed in terms of striking, that's the foundation of his confidence. On top of that, he's a very well-rounded athlete himself. So this is an exciting fight, really exciting fight. And like I said, my head's going with Islam, but my heart's going with Dan Hooker. If I'm pressed, I don't want to go back on this. And look, and I've not picked against my man. I'm going Dan Hooker. Wins this via split decision. Dan Hooker wins this via split decision, potentially next 2 rounds. That's what I'm going to say. That's my hot take on that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the little bell icon to stay up to date with the content. Enjoy the fights. Peace.